So this amendment modifies Senate File 196 by reinstating criminal penalties into the SAPA law. These criminal penalties are existing statutes, whereas Senate File 196 removes them in favor of civil penalties. The amendment version will give us both civil and criminal penalties. I'll ask Mr. Dorr if he wants to make any comments regarding this.
Mr. Dorr, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Aaron Dorr here on behalf of the members of Wyoming gun owners. We're certainly in support of Senate File 196. This has been a fight that's been going on for a long time in this building, and we believe that SF-196 would plug some of the gaps that exist in existing SAPA law, which passed in 2022. I will mention a couple points about the bill, but first, I'm going to mention kind of a macro question I've got a bunch over the last couple of days, which is why do we need to do this now with President Trump in the White House? Because SAPA was designed, of course, to protect us from Joe Biden's attacks in the Second Amendment and keep those attacks from not being enforced by Wyoming cops. And the reason for that is pretty simple. He's only in office for 4 more years. Now, I did see Congressman Ogles filed a bill last week to give him a 3rd term. I'm not sure it's going to make it through committee like we hope this bill makes it through committee today. But we have him in office for 4 more years. And more importantly, with a friendly administration and a friendly Department of Justice, now is the time to get this done because it will presumably not be sued over by the federal government and provide lasting protections then for Wyoming. This bill does 5 things. You've already heard about these from Senator Salazar. I'll just mention them briefly. We are going to introduce civil penalties. That's on page 5 of this bill. These are shall issue penalties. So if a department, and I want to stress that word department, no individual cops are going to be sued under SF-196.
And when you say a page, would you say the line too, so we can kind of follow along with you?
Yes, sir. It's page 5. And it's pretty much the entire top section, and the shall issue reference is on line 5. But that whole first section on page 5 is the institution of the civil penalties. Later on in the bill, on page 3, line 18 through page 4, line 3, we fix a problem that was created in 2022's SAPA law, as you've already heard briefly mentioned, where that law prohibited the enforcement of unconstitutional federal gun control laws with virtually no definition of what that meant. And so number 1, there's no real protection for gun owners. And number 2, it created real confusion amongst law enforcement who don't know how do we define what unconstitutional means. Could a future president sign an order that bans 30-round magazines? Is that then constitutional? The president has the authority to do that. So what this bill does on page 3, line 18 through page 4, line 3 is a blanket ban on the enforcement of any federal laws, treaties, orders, rules, regulations that involve firearms, ammo, or accessories if it's a federal order. So we're providing clarity there. The third issue we're addressing here cleans up a real problem that was made in 2022 by allowing a task force to operate. You know, what oftentimes happens in a federal enforcement action is you might have maybe it's ATF from Denver or some other department who'll come into the state. They'll grab some local law enforcement, they'll form up a task force and then enforce those federal laws. And when that happens, those officers then are temporary federal officers and they're paid for by federal dollars. What SAPA in 2022 did in current law 914-203A, it only blocked that action if they were paid for using state dollars. And so that task force was allowed to exist. This legislation would prevent that from happening. On section 4, page 4, line 11 through 12, we're clarifying that while the state is allowed to receive federal monies, that will only be allowed to be used in the enforcement of state laws when it comes to gun rights. When SAPA was passed in 2022, code section 914-203B, that allowed for federal funds to be used to enforce all federal laws in the state. That's the whole point. We're trying to preclude Wyoming cops from being used to enforce federal gun control laws. So we clean that up as well. And then finally, again, as you heard from the senator, we're clarifying these penalties apply not just to public officers, but to peace officers. And we don't define that. That's elsewhere defined in the code. I believe it's 7-2-101, subsection A, subsection 4. So in total, these 5 corrections, we believe, provide all the protections that we need to button up the problems that were either not addressed or caused in 2022. And it should give real clarity and protection to Wyoming cops who don't want to be enforcing federal gun control laws and protections to gun owners. Lastly, I was asked yesterday by some members, who does this not apply to? The question was asked, for example, if the state is asked to help deport foreign nationals for President Trump and they happen to have a firearm, would this prevent that? Page 7 of the bill on line 8 specifically makes it clear this does not apply to foreign nationals. Page 7, line 12 makes it clear this does not apply to anybody who is engaged in felony narcotics crimes. And page 7, line 13 makes it clear this does not apply to anybody who is engaged in felony crimes against another person. And what I mean by that is if the feds need help from Wyoming to arrest or detain somebody who is being investigated for these crimes, Wyoming cops can help them do that because the underlying issue is not the gun issue, it's distribution of narcotics or violent persons crimes. And so those are the 3 exceptions to this. And just as it pertains to the amendment, Mr. Chairman, we are in support of this. We've made our thoughts on this pretty clear. We don't know that's going to be very effective, and because it's not, we're not worried about this being reinstated, back into this via the amendment. And so we're in favor of the amended version as well, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, would you state again, because I think there's a fear out there that, we're going to go after the officers. Would you clarify all that, please, again?
Sure.
That it's not going off after any officer or a law enforcement, whatever.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The last thing we want to do is to go after, have any cops be penalized for doing their job and enforcing state code. SAPA has been kind of seen as a defense for gun owners, but in reality, it doesn't just defend gun owners, it defends cops in Wyoming who don't want to be used to enforce federal gun control laws. Many of them contact us. They don't want to be here in an open committee hearing to testify before you, but they don't want to be used in that way. And so what we have done in this legislation on page 5, let me turn to it, Mr. Chairman. Actually, it's going to be found on page 4, line 14. These penalties are against the state, subdivisions, or law enforcement agencies specifically, not the peace officers who do this. And so that's a big proponent. We're big fans of not having these penalties applied to the individual officers who were put in this position.
All right. President Beitman, do you want to comment?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just more of the big picture of, and these guys talked about the details in the bill, and as you can see, this is a fantastic bill, and it's very well written. We wouldn't be here if the last SAPA bill didn't have more holes in it than Swiss cheese. We're here to fix that bill. We said when that bill passed that it needed major fixing in order to be effective or even to do anything, quite frankly. And so this bill goes all the way, finishes the job that we started, and this will give us an actual Second Amendment Protection Act that will actually protect Wyoming gun owners. So just here to support the bill. I'm a proud co-sponsor on this bill. It's important that we get this thing through, and stand for any questions. Thank you.
Committee, any questions of the 3 at this point? Seeing none. Senator Iden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the panel, thanks for being here. So on the individual officers, does this give them complete immunity of being sued, or can they still, even though you can sue the agency, can the officer individually be sued any way, civil, criminal, or not? Thank you, Mr.
Whoever wants to take that one up.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, no, this, the criminal side, I can't speak as much of that. That's not necessarily an issue we have been involved in pushing, but specifically when it comes to the civil immunity of civil liability, that applies to the department and to the agency. I guess it's possible for anybody to be sued for any purpose, anytime, but this law only, SF-196 rather, only allows that to be applicable to the agency or the subdivision that knowingly violated that law.
Further questions of the 3 at this point? Stick around. Next up, we'll ask Senator Bouchard to come up and give us some background. He